This is the story of a girl named Bella. On the outside, she looks calm, strong, the kind of person who smiles even when things feel uncertain. But inside, she's carrying a question that hasn't let her breathe properly in days. It was Thanksgiving. The house was filled with warmth, the smell of roasted turkey, soft laughter echoing through the dining room, plates clinking, family members sharing what they were grateful for. It was supposed to be a day of comfort. A day of blessings. But for Bella, it felt different. While everyone around the table talked about gratitude and future plans, her mind was somewhere else. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere heavy. There was one question sitting in her heart. A question she had been avoiding. Finally, gathering the courage between one deep breath and the next, Bella looked up and asked softly, "Did the hospital send my surgery date?" And just like that, Thanksgiving dinner changed. Because sometimes, in the middle of celebration, life quietly reminds you that a storm may be waiting. And this is where Bella's journey truly begins. Hi, my name is Bella. Thanksgiving has always been my favorite holiday. The warmth, the noise, the way the whole house smells like roasted turkey and cinnamon. It's the one day of the year when everything feels safe, like nothing bad could possibly enter through the front door. This year was supposed to be the same. The dining table looked beautiful. Mom had used the good plates, the ones we only bring out for special occasions. Candles flickered softly in the center, their light reflecting in everyone's glasses. My dad was carving the turkey, pretending to host his own cooking show as usual. My little cousin kept sneaking extra rolls onto her plate when she thought no one was watching. Everyone was laughing. Everyone except me. I tried to smile at the right moments. I nodded when someone spoke to me. I even laughed once or twice, hoping no one would notice how tight my chest felt. But beneath the warmth of the room, beneath the comfort of family chatter, there was something heavy sitting inside me. A question. 4 days, it had followed me everywhere. When I woke up. When I tried to sleep. When I stood in the shower letting the water run longer than usual just so I wouldn't have to think. The hospital was supposed to send my surgery date. And I didn't know if it had arrived. Part of me didn't want to ask. As long as I didn't know, it didn't feel real. It was just a possibility. A someday. Not a calendar notification. Not a countdown. But as I looked around the table, at my parents smiling, at the golden turkey in the center, at everyone talking about what they were thankful for, I realized I couldn't carry the silence anymore. My heart started beating faster. The room suddenly felt louder. Or maybe quieter. I couldn't tell. I put my fork down carefully so no one would hear it shake against the plate. I swallowed, even though my throat felt dry. "Mom," I said softly. No one noticed at first. I tried again, a little louder this time. "Mom." She looked up at me, still smiling. "Yeah, sweetheart." And there it was. The moment I couldn't take back. Did the hospital send my surgery date? The words didn't sound as fragile as they felt. For a second, just 1 second, everything paused. The laughter faded. The clinking of silverware stopped. Even my dad's carving knife hovered in midair. It wasn't dramatic. No one gasped. No music stopped playing. But the air changed. And in that quiet shift, I knew something important had just begun. Because sometimes, the hardest part isn't the surgery. It's asking the question that makes it real. For a few seconds after I asked the question, no one spoke. My mom's smile didn't disappear immediately. It just softened. Like she was trying to decide how to answer. My dad slowly placed the carving knife down on the plate. The small, ordinary sounds of dinner felt suddenly too loud in the quiet room. Mom glanced at Dad. That look. The kind of look parents think their kids don't notice. And in that single exchange, I felt it. They knew. "Bella," Mom began gently. "They sent it last week." Last week. The words echoed in my head, louder than they should have. Last week. I repeated, my voice barely steady. She nodded. "We didn't want to tell you before Thanksgiving. We thought, maybe it would ruin today for you." Ruin today. I looked around the table, at the candles still flickering, at the half-carved turkey, At my family pretending not to stare at me but clearly listening to every breath I took. My chest tightened. So it was real. Not a maybe. Not a someday. Not something floating in the distance. There was a date. Somewhere on a calendar. Typed in black and white. Waiting for me. When? I asked. Dad cleared his throat. 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks. That wasn't far. That wasn't later. That was soon. Too soon. I tried to calculate it in my head. How many Mondays? How many mornings left before everything changed? It suddenly felt like time had sped up without asking for my permission. I was going to tell you tonight, Mom said softly. After dinner. When it was just us. I nodded slowly, but I wasn't really listening anymore. 3 weeks. My fork felt heavier in my hand. My palms were slightly damp. The warmth of the room that had once felt comforting now felt overwhelming, like the walls were too close. I hadn't realized how much hope I'd been holding on to, the quiet hope that maybe there would be a delay. Maybe the hospital was backed up. Maybe the date would be months away. Maybe I would have more time to prepare. But there it was. No more maybe. Are you okay? My dad asked carefully. That question. I didn't know how to answer it. Was I okay? I wasn't crying. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't running out of the room. But inside, something had shifted. I'm fine, I said automatically. The lie tasted strange. Mom reached across the table and gently placed her hand over mine. Her touch was warm. Steady. It's going to be okay, she whispered. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But in that moment, all I could think about was a hospital room. Bright lights. A bed. Machines. A countdown. 3 weeks. Thanksgiving dinner slowly resumed around me. Cautious laughter, softer voices, forced normalcy. But for me, everything had changed. Because sometimes, life doesn't give you time to adjust. Sometimes, it just sends the email. And expects you to be ready. After dinner ended, everything went back to normal. Or at least, that's what it looked like. Dishes clinked in the kitchen. The dishwasher hummed softly. My cousins were laughing in the living room, arguing over which movie to watch. The world hadn't stopped. But mine had. I slipped away quietly and went upstairs to my room. The hallway felt longer than usual. Each step felt heavier, like I was walking toward something I didn't want to face. Once inside, I closed the door gently behind me. And finally, I let the silence in. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the wall. 3 weeks. The number replayed in my head over and over again, like a clock ticking too loudly. 3 weeks until surgery. 3 weeks until I'd be lying in a hospital bed under bright lights. 3 weeks until doctors would be discussing my body like a procedure. I wrapped my arms around myself without realizing it. It wasn't cold, not physically, but I felt chilled from the inside out. Everyone kept saying it would be okay. It's a routine procedure. The doctor is the best. You're strong. But fear doesn't disappear just because someone calls you strong. Fear lives in the quiet moments. It lives in the what ifs. What if something goes wrong? What if I don't wake up the same? What if I'm not as brave as everyone thinks I am? I lay back on my bed and stared at the ceiling. The fan spun slowly above me, steady and predictable. I wished my thoughts were like that, simple, controlled, calm. Instead, they were loud. I imagined the hospital room. The smell of antiseptic. The cold sheets. The sound of machines beeping steadily in the background. I imagined the moment they'd wheel me away from my parents. The moment I'd have to let go of their hands. That part scared me the most. Not the surgery itself. But the surrender. The moment when control leaves your hands and you trust strangers with your life. A small knock interrupted my thoughts. Bella. Mom's voice was soft through the door. Can I come in? I quickly wiped my eyes, even though I hadn't realized tears had fallen. Yeah, I answered. She stepped inside and sat beside me on the bed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I know you're scared, she said gently. I looked down at my hands. I don't want to be. You don't have to pretend, she replied. Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It just means you move forward anyway. Her words stayed with me. Maybe bravery wasn't about feeling fearless. Maybe it was about facing the fear and not letting it decide everything. As she hugged me, I closed my eyes. The fear was still there. But now, at least, I wasn't carrying it alone. And somehow, that made the 3 weeks feel just a little less impossible. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay in bed staring at the faint glow of streetlights slipping through my curtains. The house was quiet now. No laughter. No dishes. No voices. Just the soft ticking of the clock on my wall. Tick, tick, tick. Each second felt louder than it should have. 3 weeks. I turned onto my side. Then onto my back. Then the other side again. My body was tired, but my mind refused to rest. Finally, I reached for my phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up the dark room, almost too bright. For a moment, I hesitated. I didn't have to look. I already knew what it would say. But something inside me needed to see it. Needed to make it real. I opened my email. There it was. The hospital logo at the top. The subject line, surgery confirmation date. My thumb hovered over the screen before I tapped it open. Dear Bella. Seeing my name made my stomach tighten. The email was calm, professional, almost comforting in its tone. It explained the procedure, the arrival time, pre-surgery instructions. It even said, "We look forward to supporting you through this process." Supporting me. I read the date again. Then again. It felt strange how something so life-changing could be written so simply. Just numbers on a screen. Just a scheduled appointment, like a dentist visit or a haircut. But this wasn't that. This was my body. My future. My fear. I zoomed in on the date, as if making it bigger would help me understand it better. 3 weeks. I opened my calendar app and slowly scrolled forward until I reached it. I stared at the empty square for that day. Then, with a deep breath, I typed. Surgery. 7:30 a.m. Seeing it in my own calendar felt different. More final. More personal. For a second, I felt my chest tighten again. Tears burned behind my eyes. But then something unexpected happened. The more I looked at the date, the less blurry it felt. It wasn't a monster hiding in the shadows anymore. It was just a day. A day I would wake up. A day I would go to the hospital. A day that would pass. I sat up slowly in my bed. Maybe the fear wasn't going to disappear overnight. Maybe I would still wake up anxious tomorrow. But tonight, at least, I had faced it. I had opened the email. I had read every word. I had put the date on my calendar. And somehow, that small act made me feel a little more in control. The clock kept ticking. But now, instead of sounding like a countdown, it sounded like preparation. 3 weeks. Not the end. Just the beginning of something I would have to walk through. And for the first time since dinner, I finally closed my eyes. The next morning felt different. Not lighter. Not easier. Just clearer. The date was no longer floating in uncertainty. It had a place on the calendar now. A time. A reality. I walked downstairs expecting everything to feel awkward, like we would all be tiptoeing around the word surgery. But instead, the kitchen smelled like coffee and toast. Sunlight streamed through the windows. It looked like any ordinary day. Dad was sitting at the table reading the news on his tablet. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. "Morning, Bells," he said casually, like always. I poured myself some orange juice and sat across from him. For a moment, neither of us mentioned it. But the silence wasn't heavy like last night. It felt thoughtful. He put his tablet down. "I was thinking," he said slowly. "Maybe we can make these 3 weeks count." I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he smiled gently, "instead of counting down with fear, we count down with memories. Movie nights. Your favorite dinners. Maybe that weekend trip you've been wanting." I hadn't expected that. I thought the next 3 weeks would feel like waiting in a dark room. But he was talking about light. You don't have to be strong all the time, he added. But you also don't have to let this steal every day before it even happens. His words settled into me. Later that afternoon, Mom came into my room holding a small notebook. I thought we could use this, she said, handing it to me. On the front, she had written in neat handwriting, Bella's brave journal. I let out a small laugh. Mom. Not for pretending you're not scared, she said softly. For writing everything you're feeling. The fear. The anger. The hope. All of it. I ran my fingers over the cover. Maybe I didn't have to carry everything silently. Maybe strength didn't mean silence. That evening, we sat together in the living room. No dramatic speeches. No forced positivity. Just us. At one point, I looked around, at my dad stretched out on the couch, at my mom knitting in her chair, and I realized something. They were scared too. I could see it in the way Mom watched me a little longer than usual. In the way Dad's jokes felt slightly overpracticed. But they weren't running from it. They were standing with me in it. And suddenly, I didn't feel like a patient waiting for surgery. I felt like a daughter surrounded by love. The fear was still there. But now, it wasn't the loudest thing in the room. Hope was starting to speak too. And maybe, just maybe, I was stronger than I thought. The hospital looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I just felt bigger inside my fear. The automatic doors slid open with a soft mechanical sound, and a rush of cool air brushed against my face. The smell hit me instantly, clean, sharp, sterile. It was a smell that meant safety to some people. To me, it meant reality. Mom walked beside me. Dad slightly ahead, holding the appointment papers like they were something fragile. No one was talking much. Even our footsteps sounded careful against the polished floors. We checked in at the front desk. Pre-op consultation for Bella, Mom said gently. Hearing my name attached to the word pre-op made my stomach tighten again. The nurse called my name a few minutes later. She had kind eyes and a calm smile, the type of smile that said she'd done this 1,000 times. Hi, Bella. We'll just run a few tests today and go over everything with the doctor. Just. Such a small word for something that felt so big. They checked my blood pressure. My temperature. Drew a small vial of blood. Wrapped a band around my arm that squeezed tighter and tighter until it beeped. Everything looks good, the nurse said cheerfully. Good. That word felt reassuring. I held on to it. After a short wait, we were led into a consultation room. The walls were light blue, probably meant to feel calming. A paper sheet covered the exam table, crinkling softly when I sat down. Then the doctor walked in. Confident. Professional. Steady. Bella, he said warmly, shaking my hand. I know this can feel overwhelming. Let's talk through everything. He explained the procedure step by step. How long it would take. What the recovery would look like. What to expect when I wake up. I listened carefully. Not because I wasn't scared. But because understanding made it feel slightly less unknown. Do you have any questions? He asked. I hesitated. There were so many questions. The kind that didn't fit into medical language. Will I be okay? Will I wake up the same person? Will this change me? Instead, I asked the simplest one. Will it hurt? He smiled gently. You'll be asleep during the procedure. And afterward, we'll manage your pain carefully. You won't be alone. You won't be alone. That sentence echoed in my mind. When the appointment ended, we walked back through the hospital halls. This time, I noticed things I hadn't before, a child laughing in a wheelchair, a nurse comforting an elderly patient, a family holding hands in the waiting area. Life was happening here. Not just fear. As we stepped outside into the fresh air, I took a deep breath. The sky looked normal. Cars passed by. The world hadn't changed. But something inside me had. The hospital no longer felt like a terrifying mystery. It felt structured, planned, prepared. And maybe that meant I could be too. The surgery was still 3 weeks away. But now I had seen the place. Met the doctor. Heard the plan. And somehow, the unknown felt a little less dark. After the hospital visit, Time started to feel different. It didn't rush anymore. It didn't drag either. It just moved. And I felt every single day of it. Each morning, the first thing I did was glance at the calendar on my wall. The surgery date sat there quietly, circled in soft blue ink. It didn't shout at me. It didn't flash. It just waited. 2.5 weeks. Then 2. Then 13 days. I started noticing little things more deeply. The way sunlight filled my room in the early morning, the way my dog followed me from room to room, the way Mom hummed softly while cooking dinner. Ordinary moments suddenly felt fragile. Like they mattered more. At school, my friends knew about the surgery. They tried to act normal, but I could tell they were being extra gentle with me. One of them squeezed my hand during lunch and said, "You're going to be fine." I nodded. I hoped she was right. At night, I began writing in the brave journal Mom had given me. At first, the pages were messy, thoughts scattered everywhere. I'm scared. I don't want to lose control. What if I panic that morning? But the more I wrote, the more something shifted. The fear didn't disappear, but it started to feel organized. Like instead of swirling around in my head, it had a place to sit on paper. 10 days. Dad kept his promise about making memories. We had movie nights with too much popcorn. We ordered my favorite takeout twice in 1 week. We even took a small drive to the beach just to watch the sunset. Standing there with the wind brushing against my face, I realized something. The surgery was part of my life. But it wasn't all of it. I was still me. Still laughing at Dad's bad jokes. Still arguing with Mom about which blanket was warmer. Still texting my friends late at night about random things. 7 days. The number felt heavier. I noticed my parents watching me more closely now. Not in a suffocating way, just quietly protective. Like they were memorizing me too. One night, while brushing my teeth, I caught my reflection in the mirror. "You can do this," I whispered to myself. My voice sounded small. But it was steady. 5 days. The fear returned in waves sometimes, sudden and sharp. Usually late at night. I would imagine the hospital bed again. The lights. The countdown from 10. But this time, I also imagined waking up. I imagined Mom smiling. Dad squeezing my hand. I imagined recovery. Healing. Moving forward. 3 days. The countdown was no longer just about fear. It was about courage. Because every day that passed, I didn't run. I didn't hide. I didn't pretend it wasn't happening. I faced it. One sunrise at a time. And maybe that's what bravery really is. Not being fearless. But continuing to show up, even when you are. The night before surgery didn't feel real. All day, the house had been unusually calm. Not silent, just softer. As if everyone was trying not to disturb something fragile in the air. My hospital bag sat on the chair in my room. Packed. Ready. That alone made everything feel official. Inside it were simple things, comfortable clothes, my toothbrush, the Brave journal, a charger, a small stuffed bear I'd had since childhood. Ordinary objects. But tonight, they felt like anchors. Dinner was quiet but warm. Mom made my favorite pasta. Dad tried to keep the conversation light, telling a story about a mistake he once made at work. I laughed, genuinely laughed, and for a moment, I forgot what tomorrow was. But only for a moment. Later, when I went upstairs, I paused at my bedroom door. I looked around slowly. The posters on the wall. The books on my desk. The blanket folded at the foot of my bed. I'd slept here thousands of nights without thinking twice. Tonight felt different. I sat on my bed and picked up the Brave journal. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. I opened to a blank page. "Tomorrow is the day," I wrote. The words looked small. "I'm scared. I won't pretend I'm not." I paused, staring at the page. But I also know I'm loved. And maybe that's stronger than fear. A soft knock interrupted me. Mom stepped inside first, followed by Dad. Neither of them spoke right away. They just came and sat beside me. For a moment, we stayed like that. Quiet. Together. Dad reached for my hand. His grip was warm and firm. Tomorrow morning, he said gently. We walk in with you. And we'll be there the second you wake up. Mom brushed a strand of hair behind my ear, the same way she used to when I was little. You don't have to be brave tonight, she whispered. You can just be Bella. That did it. The tears came, not loud or dramatic, just steady, honest. I'm scared, I admitted. I know, Dad said. But you're not alone, Mom added. And somehow, those 4 words wrapped around me stronger than any blanket. Later, after they left my room, I turned off the lights and lay in bed. The darkness felt softer tonight. I thought about the countdown from 10. About the bright lights. About letting go. But I also thought about waking up. About recovery. About the moment this would no longer be something I was waiting for, but something I had survived. Tomorrow would be hard. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel everything. The fear. The hope. The love. And as I closed my eyes, I realized something important. Courage isn't loud. Sometimes, it's just lying in the dark, choosing not to run. The alarm rang at 5 a.m. For a second, I didn't move. Then it hit me. Today. The room was still dark as I sat up slowly. Everything felt unusually quiet, like the world itself was holding its breath. I could hear soft movement in the hallway. Mom and Dad already awake. I got dressed in the loose, comfortable clothes we had picked out the night before. My hands trembled slightly, but I kept going. This was it. Downstairs, the kitchen lights were on. Mom handed me a small glass of water for the last sip I was allowed before surgery. Dad grabbed the hospital bag. No one said much in the car. The streets were almost empty, the sky just beginning to lighten with early morning grey. It felt strange that the world was waking up normally while mine felt so fragile. When we pulled into the hospital parking lot, my heart started racing. This place again. But today was different. The automatic doors opened, and we walked inside together. Check-in was quick. The nurse's voice was calm and practiced. Bella. I stood. Mom squeezed my hand. Dad walked on my other side. They led us to a pre-surgery room. I changed into a hospital gown, the fabric thin and unfamiliar against my skin. A nurse wrapped a bracelet around my wrist with my name and date of birth printed clearly. It felt official. Permanent. Another nurse inserted the 4. I looked away when the needle slid in. It stung for a moment, then settled into a dull ache. You're doing great, she said. Great. I didn't feel great. I felt scared. But I was still here. Still breathing. Still moving forward. The doctor came in shortly after. He reviewed everything one last time, asked if I had any questions. I shook my head. There were no more questions now. Just the moment. Soon, it was time. They began to wheel my bed down the hallway toward the operating room. The ceiling lights passed above me one by one, like slow-moving stars. Mom walked beside me, holding my fingers gently. Dad leaned down and kissed my forehead. We'll be right here when you wake up, he said. At the doors to the operating room, they had to stop. This was as far as they could go. Mom's eyes were shiny, but she smiled. I love you. I love you too, I whispered. And then the doors opened. The room was bright, brighter than I imagined. Machines beeped softly. Nurses moved with quiet efficiency. The air felt cool against my skin. They positioned me carefully. Adjusted the 4. An anesthesiologist leaned over me. I'm going to ask you to count backward from 10, okay? This was the moment I had imagined for weeks. I took a deep breath. 10. My voice sounded steady. 9. The lights above blurred slightly. 8. The sounds became softer. 7. I thought about Mom's hug. Dad's voice. 6. I thought about waking up. 5. The world faded gently. And for the first time since Thanksgiving, I let go. At first, there was only darkness. Not scary darkness. Just quiet. Then slowly, sound returned. A soft beeping. The faint rustle of fabric. Someone whispering nearby. My eyelids felt heavy, like they were carrying something I couldn't see. I tried to open them, but everything was blurry, shapes, light, movement. Bella. Mom's voice. It sounded far away, but familiar. I tried again. This time, my eyes opened a little more. The ceiling above me was white. Bright, but not as blinding as I remembered from before. "You're awake," Dad's voice said softly, filled with relief. Relief. That word wrapped around me before I could even fully understand it. I blinked slowly. My throat felt dry. My body felt heavy, like I had run a marathon in my sleep. There was soreness, yes, but it was distant, controlled, managed. "It's done," Mom whispered, squeezing my hand gently. Done. The word settled in. The surgery that had lived in my thoughts for weeks. The date circled on my calendar. The countdown from 10. It was over. Tears gathered in the corners of my eyes, not from pain, but from release. From the weight finally lifting. "You did it," Dad said quietly. And that's when it hit me. I did. Not perfectly. Not fearlessly. But I did it. I had walked into the hospital. I had faced the lights. I had counted down. And I had woken up. The nurse checked my vitals, smiling gently. "Everything went smoothly," she said. "You did great." Great. This time, it felt true. I shifted slightly and winced, but it was bearable. Temporary. A reminder that healing had already begun. Mom brushed my hair back softly. Dad kept holding my hand like he had promised. And in that hospital room, surrounded by machines and white walls, I felt something unexpected. Peace. The fear that once felt enormous now seemed smaller. Not gone completely, but quieter. Less powerful. Because the unknown was no longer ahead of me. It was behind me. Later, as I drifted in and out of sleep, I realized something important. The hardest part wasn't the surgery. It was the waiting. The imagining. The what ifs. But now there would be recovery. Rest. Slow steps forward. A new chapter. And as I lay there, holding my parents' hands, I understood something I hadn't fully believed before. I was stronger than I thought. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I walked through it anyway. And that was Bella's journey. It didn't begin in a hospital room. It didn't begin under bright lights or with the sound of machines. It began at a Thanksgiving table. With a quiet question. A simple sentence that changed everything. Did the hospital send my surgery date? From that moment on, life moved differently. There were nights filled with overthinking. Days marked carefully on a calendar. Moments of fear that felt too heavy to carry alone. But there were also small, powerful things. A father's steady hand. A mother's whispered reassurance. Friends who stayed gentle. Pages of a journal filled with honesty instead of silence. Bella's story isn't just about surgery. It's about what happens before the hard moment. It's about the waiting. The imagining. The courage it takes to face something you cannot control. Because bravery doesn't always look loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it looks like showing up anyway. Like opening the email you're scared to read. Like circling a date on a calendar instead of pretending it isn't there. Like counting down from 10, even when your voice trembles. Bella was afraid. But she didn't run. She walked forward, step by step, not because she felt fearless, but because she chose not to let fear decide her future. And when she woke up after surgery, she didn't wake up as someone different. She woke up as someone stronger. Not stronger because life was easy. Stronger because she faced what scared her most, and survived it. So if you're listening to this story and you're standing at your own Thanksgiving table moment, holding a question in your heart that feels too heavy to ask, remember this. You are allowed to be scared. You are allowed to cry. You are allowed to doubt. But you are also capable of more courage than you realize. Storms don't last forever. And sometimes, on the other side of fear, there's a new morning waiting.